My best friend and I got pregnant around the same time, and our due dates were close to each other. The day after I was admitted to the obstetrics department, my best friend was also admitted to the bed next to mine. However, my best friend was unmarried and pregnant, and even I had never met her boyfriend. I felt sorry for her being alone, so I had my husband help take care of her during prenatal checkups. Until one day, when I returned to the ward because I forgot to take my examination report, I saw my best friend snuggling in my husband's arms. I'm about to give birth, when exactly are you going to divorce Elena? My palm was pierced by my fingernails, leaving a bloody mess. I stood at the door of the ward, watching the two people I cared about most embracing intimately. Just like my heart, sinking and shattering bit by bit. Do you have the heart to see our son, from the moment he's born, unable to get a household registration because he's illegitimate? Charles patiently coaxed her, the most important thing for you right now is to safely give birth to our son. As for other matters, we'll talk after the birth. He added uneasily, we can't let Elena find out. It wasn't easy for her to get pregnant this time, and even though it's a daughter, it's still my flesh and blood. Elena is also my best friend, of course, I can't bear to hurt her. Lena rested her head on Charles's shoulder, but her gaze met mine directly. The corner of her lips curled into a cruel and sinister smile, and she added the latter half of the sentence, hurt her. The most painful thing in the world is to be betrayed by those closest and dearest to you. I almost gritted my teeth to pieces, swallowing the blood, to stop myself from rushing up to confront them about their affair. As I pushed the door, I deliberately made some noise. Charles immediately pushed Lena away, and when he saw me, there was obvious panic and guilt in his eyes. Elena, when did you arrive? My expression seemed normal, I just arrived. There are too many people in the ultrasound room downstairs. My belly is heavy now, and sitting for too long makes my back ache. Can you go and queue for me? Charles thought I hadn't noticed and breathed a sigh of relief. He smiled and stepped forward to help me, but the moment he touched me, I felt nauseous and avoided his hand. Charles looked at me strangely but didn't think much of it. After he left, I raised my hand and slapped Lena. When did it start? Lena, instead, laughed, it hasn't been that long. Charles is very nostalgic and hard to seduce, especially when you were struggling to get pregnant. He and I got it in one go. I felt utterly disgusted. Lena, I treated you like a sister, and this is how you repay me? Elena, the one who isn't loved is the mistress. Since you treat me as a sister, why not give your husband to me? I never knew a person could be so shameless. Lena, you're shameless. I was about to shake off Lena's hand when she suddenly exclaimed ouch. Then she fell backward, and before I could react, she fell to the ground, screaming in pain. Elena, why did you push me? My belly hurts so much. Charles exclaimed from outside the door, Lena. I was already unsteady from Lena's push, and Charles rushed in anxiously, pushing me away. Losing my balance, my lower back hit the sharp corner of the table. The piercing pain was so intense that I couldn't even make a sound. But I felt a gush of warmth below, and I realized my water had broken. I clutched my belly in pain and struggled to say, Charles, my water broke. Charles was about to turn back when Lena grabbed him, crying in pain, Charles, my belly hurts so much, I think I'm going into labor. Don't blame Elena, she probably just accidentally pushed me. I don't blame her. Charles anxiously picked up Lena, and as he passed by me, he looked down with cold eyes. Elena, how could you be so heartless? Lena is a pregnant woman, how could you push her? Charles accused me of being heartless, completely oblivious to the fact that my water had broken and blood was gradually staining my lower body. He was already rushing to call the doctor, holding Lena. But I'm also a pregnant woman, and the child in my belly is also yours. I fainted, and a nurse on rounds found me, shouting, oh no, the mother's water has broken, and she's bleeding heavily. Exhale, inhale, push. Because my water had broken early and I had been hit and stimulated, the delivery was extremely difficult. I was in so much pain that I almost wanted to die, but I still held on to a last shred of hope, looking towards the door. Because when I finally got pregnant, Charles was overjoyed. He hugged me and spun me around, happily saying he was going to be a father. He bought many baby supplies and even prepared a camcorder. He said that since pregnancy was hard for me, he would accompany me during the delivery and record the process, so that in the future, we could watch it with our child and see how hard it was for Mom. But when the day came, my husband never showed up. The mother is having a difficult labor and needs a family member to sign. The mother's husband is accompanying another mother in the same ward into the delivery room and cannot be reached. I gave up my last hope for Charles, closed my eyes in despair, and a tear slid down. So, he was really accompanying Lena in her delivery, abandoning his own wife. With my last bit of sanity, I said, "Cesarean section, I'll sign it myself." After a near-death experience, I finally gave birth to my daughter. When I was wheeled back to the ward, Charles finally remembered me. "Elena, you gave birth? Why didn't anyone contact me?" I sneered. "I gave birth at 12 o'clock, had a difficult labor, and needed a cesarean section." "Charles, where were you at that time?" Charles was clearly guilty and didn't dare to look at me. "I really didn't know. At that time, Lena was also having a difficult labor." "Elena, if you hadn't pushed Lena, almost causing her to lose both lives, I would have definitely accompanied you during the delivery." "Huh, how could he have the nerve to blame his irresponsibility on me?" My heart was bleeding, and I was only disappointed in him. "Charles, after I'm discharged, I have something to say to you." Charles's heart skipped a beat, feeling an inexplicable sense of foreboding. "My dear grandson is born, let me see him quickly." Margaret came in excitedly but went straight to Lena. Charles quickly glanced at me and hurriedly pulled Margaret back. "Mom, you went to the wrong place, your granddaughter is over here." Only then did Margaret reluctantly look at my daughter. I knew that he family valued boys over girls, but I didn't care, my daughter was my only treasure in this world. But Margaret always deliberately nagged by my bedside. "Elena, you've been married to Charles for so many years, yet you only have this one daughter. Look at Lena, her belly is so promising, giving birth to a son in one go." I was breastfeeding my daughter and said calmly, "Unfortunately, she is not your daughter-in-law, and the son she gave birth to is not your grandson, is he?" Margaret was choked and wanted to retort but couldn't. On the day of discharge, I came back from a walk with my daughter and found the bed next to me empty. I called Charles, but no one answered. The nurse saw me alone with the child and couldn't bear to tell me the truth. "Miss Elena, this morning, Mr. Charles handled the discharge procedures for Miss Lena in the next bed and left with her." I smiled bitterly. When the heart is riddled with holes, it only becomes more and more disappointed. With red eyes, I coaxed my daughter, "Bella, be good, Mommy will take you home." I waited for Charles at home all night, but he didn't come back. Instead, I saw my best friend posted a new Facebook update, "Seeing him busy for me and our son, I feel so sorry." The accompanying picture was of someone preparing milk, and I recognized it was Charles at a glance. In the past, I had trouble sleeping, and Charles, feeling sorry for me, would personally make me a cup of milk every night before bed. He said the milk was filled with his love, and with his love, I wouldn't have insomnia. He still kept this habit, but it was for another woman. I wiped away my tears and went to Lena's place. I knew the code to Lena's door lock. As I pushed the door open, I heard a coquettish voice from inside, "Charles, my breasts are so full and uncomfortable, please help me." Lena took Charles's hand and placed it on her chest, cooing while not forgetting to throw me a provocative look. "It seems I've interrupted your good time." Charles turned around abruptly and, seeing me, hurriedly explained, "Elena, you've misunderstood." I avoided Charles's touch. "Charles, let's get a divorce." Charles's face changed drastically, while Lena was ecstatic. I turned to leave, but Charles chased after me and grabbed me. "Elena, I won't divorce, I'll never divorce you." "Didn't I tell you, earlier Lena was just uncomfortable with engorgement, and I was just helping her." I sneered, "Helping her, and then helping her into bed?" "Charles, do you dare to admit whose child Lena's is?" Charles's face turned ugly, "You already know." I shook off his hand. But Charles wouldn't let go. That time was just an accident, I swear. Elena, I love you, I've never thought of divorcing you. It's just that the child in Lena's belly is innocent. Don't worry, I'll handle it properly. I retorted, can you guarantee to cut off relations with Lena and send her and the child abroad? Charles frowned, Elena, the child is still so young, you can't be so cruel. He slept with my best friend and had a son with her, they broke my heart, yet he turns around and calls me cruel? There's nothing more to say between us. Seeing that I wouldn't change my mind, Charles could only play his trump card. Elena, Bella has just been born, do you have the heart to let her grow up without a father? Moreover, you're just a housewife with no financial income. If we divorce, the child will definitely be awarded to me. I felt a chill all over. I never thought that I had given up my high-paying job to enter marriage for him, only for it to become a point of leverage against me. Seeing that I didn't struggle anymore, Charles hugged me and softened his tone to coax me, Elena, we've had 7 years of relationship, do you have the heart to abandon it? Give me some more time, I'll handle things at home and outside. But I would no longer easily believe Charles's lies. I began to entrust a lawyer to secretly calculate assets so that even if I separated from Charles in the future, I could support myself and my daughter. In the middle of the night, I was awakened by a thunderclap, my daughter was crying. I hurriedly went out and found Charles on the phone outside, completely unaware of our daughter's cries. I picked up my daughter and found her burning hot. Charles, Bella has a fever, quickly drive to the hospital. I had just rushed out of the room when I saw Charles on the phone while changing his shoes. There's an emergency at the company, whatever it is, wait until I come back. I had to drive myself, but my daughter kept crying. I was flustered trying to soothe her and accidentally rear-ended another car. It was pouring rain, and I protected my daughter while desperately trying to hail a cab on the street. I fell again and again, no longer feeling the pain. Finally, a kind person took me to the hospital. I was anxiously going through the procedures when, at the payment counter, I saw Charles and, not far away, Lena holding her son. My heart felt like it was being cut by a knife, and anger overwhelmed my reason. Charles. I slapped him across the face. Is this what you call an emergency at the company? Do you know that Bella has a high fever of nearly 40 degrees? The doctor said if we had come any later, she might not have made it. Charles was surprised, Bella has a fever too? I'm sorry, I didn't know. He was about to leave when Lena exclaimed while holding the child, Charles, our son's breathing is getting weaker. Charles hesitated for a second but still abandoned me. I'll go see Bella later. I watched his hurried back as he left with Lena and her son. But Charles, no one will always wait for you in the same place. I took the divorce agreement to find Charles to sign it. But I found only the child in the ward. For some reason, the ventilator had been removed, and the child's face was turning blue and red from lack of breath. I was about to call the doctor when Lena rushed in. Elena, whatever you have, come at me, why did you remove my son's ventilator? He's so young, he'll die. I was about to explain that it wasn't me when Charles, in a rage, slapped me so hard that I saw stars. Elena, how could you become so vicious? I'm so disappointed in you. I covered my face. At this moment, my disappointment reached its peak, and instead, I laughed. I wiped the blood from the corner of my mouth and looked straight at him. I didn't do it. Charles frowned. You were the only one in the room just now. If not you, who else could it be? I closed my eyes and wiped away the tears from the corner of my eyes. I swore this was the last time I would cry for Charles. Charles, I have nothing to say to you. Seeing me leave, Charles wanted to say something but was held back by Lena. Charles, our son is dying. Charles still let go of my hand, and I left without looking back. Behind me was Charles's urgent voice, telling the doctor to save his son no matter the cost. It wasn't until 2 days later that Charles returned home, exhausted. Elena, I'm back. I was a bit impulsive the past 2 days. Let's talk things over properly. Only then did Charles realize that the house was empty and lifeless. My clothes were gone, and my daughter's things were also moved out. Only a divorce agreement was left on the table. and my farewell letter. Charles, after 7 years of marriage, we shall never meet again in this life. Charles was distraught and slumped to the ground until the hospital called, saying his son was critically ill and he should hurry over. Margaret was furious. If anything happens to my grandson, Elena is a murderer, and I'll make her pay with her life. Lena cried uncontrollably. Elena and I have been sisters for over a decade. How could she be so heartless? Sob, sob, sob. Charles was in turmoil. Enough. Before the truth is clear, it may not necessarily be her doing. Charles remembered the last look I gave him. Disappointment and determination. He secretly checked the surveillance footage and found that before I arrived, a caregiver had sneakily left the ward. As soon as Charles found the caregiver, she was scared and confessed everything. It's not my fault, Miss Lena gave me money to temporarily remove the child's ventilator. Charles never expected that it was Lena who had harmed the child herself. Lena, that's your own son, how could you be so heartless? Seeing that the matter was exposed, Lena hurriedly hugged Charles and explained, Charles, I just love you too much, I just wanted me and our son to form a family with you. But I really didn't expect the situation to become so serious. Charles slapped her across the face, Lena, you venomous woman. I've said it before, no matter what, I will not divorce Elena, and it's even more impossible to marry you. The doctor came out of the emergency room, shaking his head, I'm sorry, we've done our best, but the child didn't make it. Lena collapsed to the ground. My son, my son. 3 years later, I returned from Hong Kong to the mainland to expand the drone market. During the business meeting, amidst the clinking of glasses, I noticed a pair of intense eyes staring at me. It wasn't until I went to the restroom that a hand suddenly grabbed me in the dark. Who is it? If you don't let go, I'll call the police. The person's arm tightly encircled my waist, his breath hot and urgent. Elena, I've finally found you. I didn't expect to see Charles so soon. In just 3 years, I found that he had aged considerably, with even a few strands of white hair at his temples. Charles, we're already divorced, if you don't let go, it's intentional harassment, and you could be sentenced. But he said with red eyes, I didn't sign the divorce agreement, you are still my legal wife. I sneered, Charles, you should read up, after 2 years of separation, the marital relationship is automatically dissolved. You and I have long been strangers. I don't acknowledge it. I'll never agree even if I die. Charles choked, almost pleading, Elena, it was all my fault back then, I misunderstood you. It was Lena who, to drive you away, had the caregiver remove the ventilator. Perhaps it was heaven's punishment, the child couldn't be saved, and I completely cut off relations with Lena. For these 3 years, I've been looking for you and our daughter. Elena, since university, we've been the golden couple, we've been through the 7-year itch. Please give me another chance to take care of you and Bella, okay? But my heart was already calm, no longer beating for Charles. I pulled away his hand, Charles, belated affection is not love, it's despicable. From the moment you cheated, from the moment you ignored Bella's fever to accompany your mistress, it was over between us. Now, I have my daughter, my family, my career, please stay away from my world. But obviously, Charles was always the type who, once he set his sights on something, would persist until he got it. Just like back in university, when I wanted to eat shengjiambo from dozens of kilometers away, he would brave the scorching sun to search from store to store. When I had dinner with a client, Charles managed to join the table. At the dinner, drinking was inevitable, and Charles blocked all the toasts meant for me. He accepted all drinks without refusal, drinking as if his life depended on it. A CEO who knew him joked, it's been a long time since I've seen Charles and Elena together, is there good news? Are you two getting back together? I quickly said before Charles could, it's just a rumor, Charles and I may have business dealings in the future, but apart from that, there will be no other interactions. Charles looked at me deeply, his bloodshot eyes full of hurt. But I calmly sipped my drink. By the end of the dinner, Charles unsurprisingly vomited. I handed him a tissue. But he grabbed my hand, clutching his stomach, his voice hoarse and pitiful. Elena, my stomach hurts so much, can you rub it for me? Charles had a stomach condition, he was a picky eater. To cure his stomach ailment, I studied various cuisines every day and personally delivered meals to his company. The employees all knew me because I was kind and gentle, and some would even joke with me. They would say the boss's wife came to deliver a love bento to the boss again. Sometimes Charles would tease me, pretending to have stomach pain. When I worriedly looked for medicine, he would hold my hand and place it on his abdomen, saying, "Elena, if you rub it for me, I'll be fully revived." But now, I expressionlessly withdrew my hand. "I've already called your assistant, he'll be here soon. I need to go home to accompany Bella." Charles tried to grab me, but I dodged, and he grasped at air, feeling as if his heart had been hollowed out. He stumbled and fell to one knee. "Elena, this time it's not a joke, my stomach really hurts, it hurts so much. Are you really going to ignore me?" he pleaded with red eyes. The once lofty Charles was now humbly on his knees but could no longer gain my sympathy. With Charles's status and position, as long as you want, there are plenty of people who will care for you. I left without any lingering feelings. Charles remained on one knee for a long time and finally vomited a mouthful of blood. I originally didn't want to have any more contact with Charles, but when I took my daughter to the amusement park, I ran into him again. "Elena, there are many thrilling rides at the amusement park, let me accompany you both?" As he spoke, Charles squatted down and smiled, trying to hold my daughter's hand. But my daughter warily hugged my arm and hid behind me. Charles looked hurt. "Bella, I'm your daddy, come to daddy, okay?" But my daughter shook her head in resistance. "You're not my daddy, Bella has a daddy." I picked up my daughter, my tone already impatient. "Charles, since Bella was born, you've never fulfilled your responsibilities as a father. From the moment you ignored Bella's high fever to choose Lena and her son, you were no longer worthy of being Bella's father." The color drained from Charles's face. "Elena, I didn't know Bella had a high fever at that time, if I had known." I interrupted. "Bella was crying so loudly, but you were only focused on talking to Lena on the phone. If I hadn't been home that night, Bella would have died." "Charles, do you know how heavy and cold the rain was that night? I was holding Bella, falling again and again in the pouring rain, unable to hail a cab. At that time I was thinking, Charles, I hate you to death, I regret meeting you, regret loving you, regret marrying you, and even more regret not deciding to leave you sooner." Charles staggered 2 steps, his face so pale that he almost couldn't stand. I lost interest and carried my daughter back. My daughter lay on my shoulder, looking at Charles fading into the distance. "Mommy, that strange uncle seems to be crying." "Bella is brave and doesn't cry, strange uncle is shameful." I forced a smile and touched my daughter's little face, because he did something wrong, something that can never be forgiven. "Does mommy hate the strange uncle?" I thought for a moment and nodded. My daughter also said seriously, "Then Bella hates him too." "Mommy, smile." I smiled, and my daughter smiled too, snuggling in my arms. "Mommy, when will Daddy come to pick up Bella?" "Bella misses Daddy." I comforted her. "Soon." Returning to the mainland, besides expanding business, I also wanted to come back to register my marriage. But I didn't expect that the next day, Charles would block my way with a car full of yellow roses. "Elena, I know I did many things wrong in the past, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But please give me another chance to pursue you again, like in university, okay?" I coldly brushed away the yellow roses. The roses fell to the ground, petals scattering, just like our relationship. "Charles, don't bother, I'm about to get married. There's no possibility between us anymore." Charles's face turned pale. "Elena, don't joke like that." I didn't want to waste words with him and turned to leave. Suddenly, a car rushed out, and I couldn't dodge in time. "Elena, be careful." With a loud bang, Charles hugged me and rolled on the ground several times. I got up dizzily and touched a handful of blood, which was from Charles. "Charles? Wake up, don't play dead." My hands were shaking. "Call an ambulance, quickly." When Charles was pushed into the operating room, I slumped into a chair, my mind in turmoil. I wanted to completely cut ties with Charles, but I didn't expect him to risk his life to save me. Fortunately, Charles's life was not in danger. After he was arranged in the VIP ward, seeing that he was fine, I planned to leave. "Wife, where are you going?" I couldn't leave and was hugged by Charles. "Let me go, Charles, we've long been divorced." But Charles was shocked. "That's impossible. We just got married, I love you so much, and you love me too." "Wife, don't joke with me like this." I realized something was wrong. The doctor examined him. When the patient was in the car accident, his head hit the ground hard, which may have caused memory loss. "How can it be recovered?" The doctor couldn't guarantee. It might be temporary or permanent, but he can't be subjected to too much stimulation. It has to be taken slowly. After all, it was to save me, and I couldn't bear to be heartless. "Charles, I'll help you one last time. After this, we'll go our separate ways." I never thought that one day I would return to the marital home with Charles. Moreover, the decoration in the villa was still the same as when I left. "Wife, are you hungry? What do you want to eat?" "I'll cook." I frowned. Whatever. Charles made all the dishes I loved, but I didn't eat much. Charles was troubled. "Don't you like it?" "I'm sorry, my cooking skills are not good. I'll definitely improve in the future." In the evening, Charles made me milk. Both the temperature and sweetness were exactly the same as before. Charles squatted in front of me, holding my hand, his eyes full of my reflection. "Wife, from now on, you must drink the loving milk I make for you every night to sleep." I indifferently withdrew my hand. The milk was the same as before, but the love from back then was long gone. Although I was back in the marital home, I didn't sleep well that night. Early in the morning, Charles, sweating profusely, presented a hot serving of shengjiambo to me. "Wife, yang shengjiambo, your favorite from university days." The owner moved, and I searched for a long time. I kept it warm with my body all the way. "It's still hot. Try it quickly. Is it the same taste as in university?" I saw that Charles's lower abdomen was scalded red. He had protected the freshly made, hot shengjiambo in his arms all the way back. I took a bite, but tears fell on the shengjiambo first. Charles hurriedly wiped my tears. "What's wrong, wife? Doesn't it taste good?" "It's delicious, the same taste, but," I looked at him, "the heart is different." Charles held my hand and placed it on his chest. "It's the same, wife, my love for you is always the same." I withdrew my hand again. "Charles, find some time to go back to school. I haven't been back for a long time either." Returning to our alma mater, things had changed. Charles took me to the library. There weren't many students at this time. I saw by the window, two students sitting close together, sharing a pair of earphones, each with one earbud, the wire connecting them like a thread of love. "Classmate, did you drop this, The Ordinary World?" I turned back and saw Charles handing me the book. The cover's production date was the day my best friend cheated with my husband, just like when Charles and I first met. He racked his brains to find an opportunity to strike up a conversation. When I took the book, he smoothly started talking about his insights on the book. I felt that our values were very compatible, and we added each other on Facebook. Little did I know, this was his carefully planned design after falling in love with me at first sight. Now I only read business proposals. I didn't take it and turned to walk away. Charles's hand holding the book stiffened in midair. He smiled bitterly, and chased after me again. When we reached the laboratory building, it started to drizzle. Charles opened his umbrella. "Classmate, it's raining, let me walk you back to the dorm." I looked up and met Charles's gaze under the umbrella. Back then, under one umbrella, it was raining heavily. He was afraid I would get wet, so he tilted most of the umbrella towards me. It wasn't until we reached the dorm that I noticed half of his body was soaked. I blamed him for shielding me entirely with the umbrella. He just smiled foolishly and said that even if his whole body got wet, he couldn't let a single hair of mine get wet. That's how our feelings began. But now, I hid under the eaves. "Then let's wait until the rain stops before leaving." I stood under the corridor, he stood under the umbrella. What separated us was not just the rain, but also the irretrievable years. After the rain stopped, we passed an ice cream shop with students lining up. Charles asked me to wait and ran to queue under the scorching sun. When he came back with the ice cream, he found that I was no longer there. Anxiously searching around, he finally found me under the rostrum and happily ran over. Classmate, summer and ice cream are the perfect match, and you and I are a natural pair. Would you be willing to be with me? Before he could finish, Charles noticed that the ice cream in his hand had melted. He was a bit embarrassed and anxiously tried to wipe the continuously melting ice cream. Young love is always the purest, he confessed to me with an ice cream and promised that every summer, he would personally make my favorite grass-flavored ice cream for me. I agreed to date him, and that agreement lasted for 7 years of relationship. Once the ice cream melts, it's just water, throw it away. Charles anxiously tried to salvage it, but I shattered his last illusion. When I gave birth to Bella, I had a difficult labor and had to have a cesarean section. Since then, my body has weakened, and I get stomachaches if I touch anything cold. Charles's breath became heavy with pain, his face turning pale. I'm sorry, I didn't know. Wife, I swear, from now on, I'll remember all your habits. It doesn't matter anymore. I continued walking. On the basketball court, energetic students were playing, and many female students on the stands were cheering with youthful enthusiasm. Charles, not wanting to feel old, ran over and joined the basketball team. Some students recognized Charles and me. You're senior Elena, right? I didn't expect to meet you and senior Charles at school. Although you've graduated for many years, you and senior Charles have always been #1 on our school's couple list on the forum. Are you here to revisit old haunts and rekindle your love? How romantic. Before I could answer, the surroundings suddenly quieted down. Charles, sweating profusely, walked towards me step by step. His face bore a brilliant smile like back then. He knelt in front of me and extended his hand. Girlfriend, I'm thirsty. Our romance began at a basketball game when Charles loudly called me his girlfriend. Since then, asking for water from one's girlfriend at basketball games became legendary, and many followed Charles's example. It's still one of the popular ways for couples to announce their relationship at school. Amidst the envious voices of the people around saying, I didn't expect senior Charles to still be so romantic after so many years, I lowered my eyes and said, there's a vending machine nearby. As I got up to leave, Charles was left alone, his face pale. And there were whispers around. I heard senior Charles and senior Elena are divorced. Is it true? Even the once fairy tale couple can have a bad ending? I don't believe in love anymore. The last stop was Swan Lake. Charles stood among the sea of heart-shaped roses he had carefully prepared, kneeling on one knee before me, just like when he secretly prepared the proposal ceremony right after graduation. He swore to love, cherish, and protect me for a lifetime. I covered my mouth in surprise and disbelief until he finished his oath on his knees. Amidst the cheers of marry him, I said yes. Charles put the diamond ring symbolizing eternal love on my ring finger. But now, my ring finger is empty, and the ring Charles held up was identical to the one from back then. Wife, over these years, I must have owed you a lot. Please give me another chance to love you properly again, okay? I extended my hand, and Charles's eyes were full of joy. But just as he was about to hold my hand and put the ring on, I picked up a flower basket nearby, poured out the roses, and handed the empty basket to him. If you can fill this basket with water, I'll start over with you. Charles seemed to grasp at the last straw, afraid I would regret it. He quickly took the basket and scooped water from Swan Lake. But when he lifted the full basket, the water instantly flowed out from all sides through the gaps. Charles didn't give up and tried repeatedly, but it was all in vain, like trying to carry water in a bamboo basket. Charles, our relationship is like trying to carry water in a bamboo basket. What's done cannot be undone. I played along with you in this act, now it's time for the curtain to fall. Stop pretending to have amnesia. Charles knelt for a long time as if soulless. When did you find out? Maybe it was because he kept calling me wife? Even at the best times of our relationship, he was never this passionate. Or maybe it was because he actively cooked for me. But he forgot that during 3 years in school and 4 years of marriage, he never cooked. Let's end it here. I ignored the soulless Charles by the roadside and went to pick up my daughter from her interest class. But the teacher told me that half an hour ago, a woman claiming to be her aunt had picked her up. I immediately had a bad feeling and checked the surveillance, horrified to find that it was Lena who had taken my daughter. An unknown number called. "Elena, my good sister, how have you been these 3 years? I've been thinking about you day and night. Do you want to see your precious daughter? Come to the secret base, I'll be waiting for you." Charles hurried over upon learning this. "Elena, don't worry, Lena has gone mad these 3 years. Rest assured, I will definitely rescue Bella safely." I slapped him hard. "Charles, you and Lena ruined my life, and now you want to ruin my daughter. If anything happens to Bella, I won't let you off even in death." The secret base was where my friendship with Lena began. But ultimately, it became the grave of our friendship. My daughter was tied on the rooftop, with the other end of the rope in Lena's hand. "Elena, why is it that my son died, while you and your daughter not only live well but also enjoy Charles's renewed pursuit of you?" I cried and told her to come at me with whatever she had, not to hurt my daughter. Back then, I drugged Charles to have the first time. I tried every means, but he still refused to divorce you. Later, you finally left, but he still didn't have me in his eyes and crazily looked for you. Since that's the case, let's all die together." She cut the rope, and I screamed in despair, "No." Charles silently went around to the back, and the moment my daughter fell, he lunged forward, and both of them fell off the rooftop together. Blood covered the ground, but my daughter, protected in Charles's arms, was only frightened. All this blood was from Charles. With trembling hands, I said, "Charles, I'll call an ambulance right away." But he grabbed my hand, his eyes starting to lose focus. "It's too late." Blood was flowing from his eyes, nose, and mouth. He smiled bitterly and mocked himself. How ugly. My heart was torn into pieces. "No, don't die, I don't hate you anymore. Elena, don't cry. Back then, I was blind and foolish, making you cry for me many times. I lost you, how could I pray that you would still wait for me in the same place? I deserve this." With his last bit of strength, he asked me, "Elena, if we could start over, would you still choose me?" In the end, he didn't wait for my answer. His hand, holding mine, let go like the wind. Later, Lena was sentenced to death for intentional homicide. And Bella, as Charles's only child, inherited all his estate. How ironic that the He family, which valued sons over daughters, ended up with only a daughter as the sole heir. I took my daughter and placed a bouquet of white roses in front of the tombstone. My daughter curiously asked me, "Mommy, is the uncle in the photo the one who saved me?" I squatted down, stroked her head, and told her, "Bella, he's not an uncle, he's your father." I gently instructed, "Bella, every year from now on, you must come to offer him incense, remember?" My daughter nodded obediently. When I took my daughter out of the cemetery, my new husband had been waiting outside for a long time. He held an umbrella and extended his hand to me. "Elena, let's go home."